Hello everyone, welcome back to another deck highlight video. My name is Brett and today we have what is probably the most fun I've had playing Universes in a while. If you watched my Ranking the Heroes of Exandria video, you'll know I kind of gushed about this character. I believe I called myself a permanent resident of Value Town, and baby Vex is definitely the mayor. She does some really cool things, has some really cool synergies, but I do have to warn you that this deck is definitely not for the faint of wallet because this attack lineup is definitely a yikes out of 10 if you're balling on a budget. But if you've got the cash and you want the key to Value Town, you have definitely come to the right place. Thank you for tuning in to the Ace Maneuvers channel. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe for all your Universes needs. So, starting with this character, she she's just great. Enhance once per turn, build one ally asset or ally backup from your card pool. If you did and it is your turn, draw one card. This is a really great form of what I call velocity cheat. You get to accelerate very synergistic pieces of your deck into your staging area. Normally, you have to wait a turn before they can come online. So she just gets to go a little bit faster than your regular ally synergy focus deck. And then she also has response flip one foundation after your ranged or weapon attack is not blocked. Unflip one foundation. So if the opponent doesn't start blocking your things, there are some really, okay things you get to do with the deck. But then there's also one really gross thing you get to do with the deck, and I'll get into that when we get to the foundation base. But starting out here, obviously the most important card of the deck is Trinket. You're playing a full set. You do want to find them as quickly as possible. You are playing the full set of Hunter's Ally, and then you're also playing 3 copies of a Trinket for Vex. Vex dancing Trinket in and out of the card pool is kind of what this entire deck is built around. So you just want to get this card online as quickly as possible. It's 8 damage over the course of your turn cycle. It's minus 8 damage and a low block back to your hand on defense. So just a really super flexible card. And again, you just want to see it as quickly as possible. The other card that this deck is built to synergize around here is Jarrett Howarth. While this is in your stage, your character is a warrior, whatever. Response, add this card to your card pool. After your weapon attack is blocked, add it to your hand. This card can create some really awkward scenarios for the opponent, especially when you start combining things like violent animus shot. So, say you lead with a shot. If the opponent blocks it, cool. You Jarrett into your pool, put violent animus shot back into your hand, slam the violent animus shot, use Vex to build Jarrett back down, present the exact same dilemma. It's basically a guaranteed way to get 2 cards out of their hand in some way, shape, or form. So that's one angle of attack that this deck goes with, is just kind of ripping their hand apart, presenting a very awkward situation there. Getting into the rest of the attack lineup here, we have Sweeping Daggers. It's easily the best ultra rare in Heroes of Exandria. This deck doesn't have a lot of raw stat manipulation. It does not produce very large things very consistently unless you're kind of going all in. So Sweeping Daggers being able to steal a little bit of raw power output from the opponent's discard pile is just great. And you get to do the same thing with daggers that you do with Animus Shot. Slam Sweeping Daggers. Do they block it? Cool. Jarrett pulls it back into your hand. Vex builds Jarret back down, slam the Sweeping Daggers, present the same situation again. Hunter's Ally, we already kind of mentioned how important this card is. You do have a small ally package in your foundation base, so this card can build you something if you're a little light on tempo there, but its most obvious purpose is to fish up trinkets and Jarrets just to start the synergies going. We are going to be playing 4 copies of High Velocity Slice. Really, because this is actually just the best high block that Air has to offer. You look at a lot of the other things, and you have like Bang Bang, which is okay. You have Bad News Bullet, which is again okay, but it's very expensive. And for a deck that wants to be like looping things or playing a long string of attacks, Bad News Bullet just really isn't what you're looking for. This snaps you a momentum, which is a, hey, look, velocity violation again. Stun 1 to help make it a little more difficult. Breaker on defense. Just an all-around really amazing card. If you don't have a set of these, you should probably wishlist them on TCG Player. They're just going to get more difficult to acquire as more and more sets go out, so I can only see the value of this card going up and up and up. Next, we have Aerial Goblin Bolt. This card is super obnoxious. You'll see that I'm actually playing 2 more of them in the sideboard. So you don't really have a way of shutting off really problematic cards in the opponent's staging area. You're kind of really soft to things like VME. There's nothing you can do about that. But Goblin Bolt can, one, deal with a problematic foundation that you just don't want to deal with for the turn. And then for things like Cape, it just gets to hang out in the card pool and just shut that off at a moment's notice. It functions in the pool when you block with it, which can be life-saving, cut off their like game-winning blitz or enhance. Again, this is another one of those cards where I don't really see them printing another one with this much utility this efficiently. So it just fills a lot of holes. It does everything you want to do. And when your big thing is a combo kill with things like Grenadier Blast, move Trinket into the pool for +4 damage, move Trinket back down with Vex, move Trinket back up, so it's +8 damage, double it to 22 after like ripping their hand apart with Violent Animus Shot, you kind of really want a Goblin Bolt in your pool to save you from things like Cape. Just a really, really good card overall. You bring in 2 from the sideboard for the longer, grindier games. Sometimes you'll just need to shut off multiple problematic things. So you'll always, in some way, shape, or form, want 4 of them, in my opinion. I talked about the combo with Grenadier Blast. It's also a +1 high block, so it shores up that zone. I don't really know if this is the correct 2 of to play in this slot, especially since it does check a 2. But I mentioned at the start of the video that this deck doesn't have a lot of raw stat output, and this is just like the single most efficient card, where if the opponent drops their shields, you can just Voltron up 22, 25, 26 damage out of nowhere. And if they don't constantly respect that, they're just going to die. You could play things like Storm of Arrows in this slot. You do have Pressured by All for One to stack damage onto that. That is a viable thing to do, but with only 1 Pressured by All for One in the list, if you go with Storm of Arrows, I would definitely try finding room for more Pressured by All for Ones, just so you can consistently make it 16 damage off the Echo. You could also try things like Bad News Bullet. I mentioned that earlier. I don't really like that card, especially the conditions for it to turn on. You're going to want to play it late in the string, so it'll just be really difficult to play. Before I move into the foundation base here, because that is a pile of cards and we're going to go over them one by one, I kind of want to point out how absurdly good this core weapon lineup is for air. Like, high velocity slice is just so generically good. Sweeping daggers is just so generically good, and it counters other sweeping daggers. I At testing last week, I sweeping daggers, ate his dagger, ate another dagger, and then ate a falling skies out of his discard pile. That was pretty funny. And so this core, like, 12 cards is just so good, so flexible. It covers all three zones. That from there you can kind of just focus on building in the synergies that you need for your deck. For Vex, it's Hunter's Ally. For things like Mikasa 1, you could play Lethal Slash here. You could get Walk the Dogs into the list. I don't play it here because you don't really have a lot of ways to force committal. So if you draw a couple Walk the Dogs and the opponent hasn't tapped, they can kind of just get really clunky. But getting off track here, this core weapon lineup is just kind of a universal thing. I think it really kind of pushes air into the upper tiers of the tournament environment, especially once lists start getting refined. So this is definitely a package to keep your eyes out for. And if you have the opportunity to invest in these particular cards, definitely do so. Moving into the foundation base here, Warden's Protection. It's not super great. It's largely here because it is an ally, so that you can fish it up with Hunter's Ally, get a little bit of tempo there. But the fact that you can airdrop a foundation from your hand, so you can cheat things like Pressured by All for One in for surprise damage. You can get Masho Concealment in for surprise cancellation. You can get Uratogi in to just help you draw cards. It's good enough, but you'd rather be spending your Hunter's Ally on something more powerful. Uplifting Bond is the third card that is like hyper synergistic with Vex here. Let me explain. So, say you slam a Violent Animus shot, right? You respond with Uplifting Bond. They block it, great. Jarrett, pull it back, do it again. You slam another Violent Animus shot, they don't block it. You just Vex, flip Uplifting Bond to pay the cost for Vex, and then unflip Uplifting Bond. And since it's lost its text and then regained its text, it's considered a new instance of the ability, so you get another instance of once per turn. So once the opponent is no longer blocking your attacks, you get to gain a life every single attack, and you just get to ignore progressive difficulty for the rest of the turn. Which, again, for decks that are looking to build long synergistic strings like this one is, this is what lets you do that. Warm and Bubbly, not much to say here. It's just Air's best zero difficulty foundation right now. Even if there was no Warm and Bubbly and you were forced to play like one of the Attack on Titan blank 0/5s, I would still find a room to play a 4 set of zeros. They just help your opening curves so much. And this one actually has relevant text on it. You can like loop trinkets in and out of the pool, reduce damage with Warm and Bubbly, and Vex just becomes increasingly more and more difficult to kill. Gathering Supplies is here just kind of as a +2 high block, a 1 difficulty foundation. It's also a Deadlock outlet. A deck that is as grindy as this one is going to probably want to dance in and out of Deadlock as much as possible. The fact that it is a little bit of stat pump for your attacks, that's kind of just a bonus on top of it. Desperate Plea is the best one drop in the deck for someone who wants to get as established as quickly as possible as Vex does. The fact that your blocks now become an additional resource, whether you're dropping in like a cheerleader out of nowhere or getting your one ofs like Macho Concealment or incompatible quirks into play quicker, it's just a really good card. Definitely play 4. Shobijin's here. It has the ally keyword. It has Breaker 2. For like weak turns, you can unflip this thing if you think you're going to need a Breaker 2. Just, again, a really solid card with the ally keyword. Fearsome Transformations, it just draws you a card. You're always going to need some card flow, especially in a deck that doesn't have a character that draws multiple cards on their face. Vex draws 1 and it's only on your turn. So this can really smooth out some turns. It does some cute stuff with another card in the deck if you've already burned your Vex draw for the turn. Can't imagine cutting this down from 4. Infinite Potential. This is, again, just kind of here as a +1 high block to round out the curve. It does, change something to high, so that can save you from like a walk the dog out of nowhere. You can probably cut it, but then your numbers, like your overall difficulty curve, become a little bit skewed. So if you cut this card, I would find another 1-drop to replace it, just so that you can curve out on your opening turns a little bit better. Shapechanger Skill was a card that honestly surprised me as to how indifferent I became to it as I played the deck more and more. I started it at 4. It's at 2 right now. The +1 speed is nice. You get to do kind of the same uplifting bond dance to draw cards when the opponent isn't blocking. Like, you just flip it to itself with Vex, and then you unflip it to draw a card. But if you're at the point where you're doing that dance with Vex, you're either going for the kill, so you're going to want to be unflipping things like Trinket for extra damage, or uplifting Bond to ignore progressive difficulty while you ramp up to your big kill. Shapechanger Skill just kind of started falling by the wayside. I still play 2. The card draw is still good enough where if you're doing like a poke turn and the opponent just kind of shrugs and takes it and you get a bonus card off of it, cool. I can't see you ever fully cutting it from the deck just because of that. The +1 speed, again, is good in a pinch, but this is not a card you're going to play 4 of. I don't agree with 4 of at all. Last Second Rescue. This is just one of your best I don't die cards. If the opponent is kind of a long string deck like this, being able to unflip it with Vex just to buy yourself extra health is pretty good. Sacrificing it obviously sucks, but if you're at the point where you have to sacrifice it, you're probably soaking like an 8 damage attack with it. Worth it, in my opinion here. You might want one more in the sideboard, just because this is going to be one of those cards that aggressive decks spend their hole pokers on. Having to, have one of their attacks eaten is something they're going to want to turn off. So, this would be like a good aerial goblin bolt target, for example. Pressured by All for One. I did mention I have this at 1 right now, just because the cost is so expensive and it does check a 4. But airdropping it in with Warden's Protection just kind of pantses people out of nowhere. It is a deadlock outlet if absolutely necessary. Like if you need to go thermonuclear turbo, get yourself out of deadlock. But the 3 damage is real, you know? If you're stacking it up on Grenadier Blast, it's suddenly 12 damage by itself. Maybe you Trinket Dance it if you've already burned one trinket, a trinket plus a pressured by all for one, and suddenly your Grenadier is 20 damage out of nowhere. So this card is just good enough to warrant one slot in here. The +1 mid block certainly doesn't hurt either. This card's so obnoxious. Why is this card tenacious? Why is this card playable while committed? This deck doesn't really have a lot of momentum outlets. You have the EX on Hunter's Ally, and really that's kind of it. So just being able to convert all of your momentum into -3 damage when you're also doing trinket dances, when you're doing warm and bubblies, when you've got last second rescue, just super obnoxious, really hard to deal with. The opponent has to seal it, or they're just going to have a really difficult time killing you when you have a Dragon's Fortitude up. We do play 2 Cheerleader. Again, it's a good I don't die card, just very versatile all around. It is another way to spend momentum. Just giving something flash if they're trying to set up something, turning off a Nick Reagan, for instance, for an attack, can buy you a lot of time. This is another card where I could see maybe finding one more of in the sideboard. Maybe if like Defend the City is just not good in your environment, trimming these out, putting another Cheerleader and another couple tech cards in there would be just fine. I love Elvish Tutoring. Magic the Gathering reference aside, just tutor for your Violent Animus shot, put it on top of your deck, move Trinket into your pool, move Trinket back down with Vex, draw the Violent Animus shot off the top of your deck, keep your string going. Tutor for your Grenadier Blast, tutor for your Aerial Goblin Bolt. There was a time where I had the Uraraka 1/5 that just flipped to ready a face down, just so I could try and greed more off of Elvish Tutoring. So this would flip commit, you would ready it with the Uraraka 1/5, then you'd unflip it with Vex. That is like Omega levels of value. But it didn't come together often enough. So I cut that 1/5, but I did not cut this card because when this card is good, it is actually nuts. So you're always going to want access to it in some way, shape, or form. We got the Singleton Masho Concealment. Canceling an enhance ability on a foundation is going to let you push some lethals through. It does have the ally keyword, so you can cheat it into play with Hunter's Ally. I am playing another copy of it in the sideboard, just for those really grindy matchups. 2 of Childlike Appearance. This is another one of your momentum outlets. It also blocks +2 high. Big thing here is if the opponent produces a lot of speed, you get to block the attack. You also get to shut off their best foundation, either if it's their best foundation during the kill string, or it sets you up for a crackback. You shut off their best defensive foundation if you don't think they can kill you. Just a very versatile card all around. Good defensive piece. Uratogi Expertise. This is the build your own +1 hand size. Form commit draw is pretty okay. It has ally, so you can cheat it in with Hunter's Ally. You can do the cute thing where you just, Elvish Tutoring, put it on top of your deck, and then since you've spent an enhance phase, you've obviously attacked, so you just get to draw it with Uratogi Expertise. Nice. Incompatible Quirks is one of those cards where I have no idea why it's not a bigger deal to more people. I think this card is absurd when you get it into play. Not only is it a deadlock outlet, but it's also just a shinobi tradition for all you boomers out there. It's kind of a mini Four Eyes. You know how she does. She just cashes in your committed foundations. She builds a ready foundation. This cashes in one of your committed foundations, and you just get to ready it. You get to keep going. So on the long kill strings where you haven't managed to start getting uplifting bond online just yet, this is the card that is going to get you 3 or 4 attacks deep, and in a pinch, it's also just -2 speed. Real good. I've got one more in the sideboard for those instances where you need to either get this online as quickly as possible, or you need to try and get into a kill string faster than the usual turn or 4 or 5 that you usually go for. This card just lets you pivot on an axis that not a lot of other cards let you do. And then finally, we do have a trinket for Vex. Shout out to Scott Desjarnet for reminding me that this card exists. I had kind of glossed over it when I was initially building the deck. I thought to myself, hey, Hunter's Ally should be enough for getting Trinket into play, right? And then I was showing the initial list off to Scott, and he basically said, like, Trinket for Vex also gives damage, right? And you kind of suck at dealing damage. So I found room for 3. You can unflip it with Vex, start stringing 3 damage across all your cards. You can wombo it onto Grenadier Blast, then double it. It is essentially 3 extra copies of Trinket to help get that card online. Or if the opponent has something damnable like Titanstone Knuckles, this will let you get Trinket back into play while you're trying to kill them. Getting into the sideboard here, this is kind of just the greatest hits of cards I wish I had in the main board but can't really justify. Stopping for Breakfast turns off the random runaways that you might run into. Defend the City is for any stun-centric decks that might show up. It's also a 2/6 +1 high. Already talked about incompatible quirks. Already talked about how obnoxious Aerial Goblin Bolt is. Already talked about Masho Concealment. And then lastly, we do have Young Heroes. Originally, this was in the main board, but the opening build started getting really clunky. Sometimes you would draw like this, plus a trinket, and then an attack, and you only had 3 foundations, which I honestly feel is like an auto mulligan in this deck. You can keep trinket and like 4 foundations and an attack, or trinket, 3 foundations, 2 attacks if you get the review step and the pity on your opening hand. But this one asset really felt like it was starting to skew the numbers into the clunky territory. I still want one of them. Access in some way, shape, or form. It is a way to shut off rival assets. So hitting Titanstone Knuckles, hitting Capes, hitting just things you don't really want to deal with for the turn. And again, it has the ally keyword. So you just put it in your deck, you fish it up with Hunter's Ally, and you're off to the races. Do I think this deck is S tier? No, probably not. The Four Eyes of the format, the Nick Reagans of the format, probably go over the top of this pretty easily, since Vex does take a couple of turns to get online. But man, I have so much fun just doing cute little pieces of garbage interactions with this deck. I definitely think it is a top 16 capable deck. You largely do get carried on the powers of your synergies and just like the overall raw power level of all your attacks here. There's so many good attacks here. A lot of decks sometimes get stuck running a suboptimal card just because it enables a synergy. This deck doesn't do that. The attacks are all just kind of generically good. That's actually something I want to pause and talk about real quick. Something that a lot of decks suffer from that keep them in the B or C tier is they have a very rigid sequence of attacks that they need to play in order to maximize their lethality. Like, you need to play this attack at this point, this attack at this point. And if you're not playing that very specific sequence of attacks, you're just not as optimal as you could be. The better decks in the format, they don't really have that rigid prescribed sequencing that they need to do. They can kind of just like slam sweeping daggers first, or hunter's allies first, high velocity slice first, chase high velocity slice with either violent animus shot or sweeping daggers. It's just a lot of flexibility in how you approach the turn. It's very fluid, it's very freeform, it's very adaptable. You don't get locked in, and therefore you don't get screwed if you don't draw that one middle piece of your string that you need. And even if you do have to, do a really long string here, where you have to like lead with a hunter's ally to find trinket, get a goblin bolt into your pool so that you can tutor up grenadier blast with elvish tutoring to have a shot. The only thing that needs to go last is Grenadier Blast. You can do everything else in whatever sequence you want. Obviously, you kind of want to curve your 5s first before your 4s and your 3. But you don't have to. You can try baiting the opponent. Maybe you need to sweeping dagger something out of their discard pile so they don't have access to it. Or maybe it's like the key card you need to open them up for the turn and you absolutely have to do it first. Go for it, because I guarantee you, forcing the opponent to block your sweeping daggers only for you to Jared it back into your hand, it feels so good. It is so dirty. The first couple of times my locals saw me doing it, I kind of had this sick, demented grin on my face as the horrors of what I was about to inflict upon them were suddenly dawning on them. I hope your locals get that exact same sense of realization when you start refreshing your uplifting bonds as well. But that's about it. You have any feedback for me, find me on Facebook, reach out in the comment sections, let me know. It's been awesome rambling with you guys. Hope you have a good night. I'll have another spicy list for you next week. Might have a video essay. There's a couple of things the community has been rumbling about that I kind of want to share deeper thoughts on. So if I have some extra time, you might get 2 videos from me next week. Other than that, good night, guys. Take care.